Actually, thank you for the very good keynote introduction, which I believe has touched a number of items or points that are, for us, give a very similar perspective, I would say, in the world of standardization. The first thing, I don't know how many of you are familiar with what is ISO, the International Organization for Standardizations. Probably some of you know. Well, it is the largest standards developing organization. It is a network of 164 national members, from one member per country. We have a collection now of more than 23,000 international standards. That's a little bit old data, with a lot of activities involving technical committees in many different sectors and areas. There are literally tens of thousands of experts that participate in the development of standards in many different sectors. ISO is a multi-stakeholder, multi-sector organization and basically develops standards for almost everything except electrotechnology, which is covered by our sister organization, the IEC, also here in Geneva, and telecommunication, which is the ITU, the other organization sitting here in Geneva dealing with those standards. So but it's primarily a network. What we do here in Geneva is a very small entity, and the bulk of the work is done by the national standards bodies. It's actually a federation of national standards bodies, and the large number of organizations in liaison, more than 600, and these organizations involved a lot of organizations from the UN, non-governmental organizations and other groups that aggregate stakeholders on specific areas. Let me start with a few definitions, because standardization and standard, everybody uses the term standard, but not always, well, we could talk a lot about what is a standard. This is the ISO definition, the ISO IEC definition, so it's a document established by consensus and approved by recognized bodies that provide these type of things. It's an elegant way to describe the type of order that standards want to introduce in a given discipline. So rules, guidelines, characteristics for activities or their result aimed at achieving the optimum degree of order in a given context. Just as a personal note, I am, as a background, a physicist. I used to be a physicist. And in this world, I'm surrounded by engineers. And I know you know the problem, because this is the case also for you, but in our case, they are in control. So, but life goes on. That's just that's a personal note. No, that's a joke, but standards, even if we can use the term in a slightly broader way, are actually an essential element of the infrastructure of modern industrial societies, because they ensure these things: reliable measurement and testing, the interchangeability of parts, the interoperability of components, the codification of knowledge that concern characteristics and properties of materials, products, and the structure and organization of processes, and objective criteria and methods to assess health, safety requirements, and environmental impacts. So it's a lot of things, and actually standards is one element of those very invisible infrastructure that are at the basis of the functioning of our society. And you see standards everywhere in there. Now, actually, it's a very long story, but basically modern standards have been introduced. I would say the genesis is with the introduction of the metric system on the one hand, and with the Industrial Revolution on the other hand. You cannot have industrial products without standards, but that's a very long story. Now, the other thing I wanted to say here, because we're talking about it, my presentation covers two aspects. One is the role of standardization, particularly in relation to innovation, and the second part is on social responsibility. And we have to step back a second and say, what is innovation? Again, innovation, you can have a different way of describing that. I would say from the point of view of, how to say, market and society, innovation as defined the OECD manual as the implementation of a new or significantly improved product or process, And the guru in the economic world of innovation is, in the economic sciences, certainly Schumpeter. And one important element in the work of Schumpeter is the distinction between invention and innovation, considering innovations like any inventions that have found a market or a successful way to be applied in market and society. So with that said, sometimes people think that standards and innovation are at odds with each other, which is absolutely not true. Because on the contrary, standards and standardization are enabler of innovation in many ways. And I'm sure that when you think a second, you will realize with me that there are at least 4 primary areas. The first one is that they allow to apply at the right time critical design constraints and free time for inventive, original work instead of reinventing the wheel. And you have endless examples of this type of role that standards play. But the second and probably most important role from the point of view of innovation is that they enable the dissemination of technology. It's absolutely a critical element from the invention and the creation of an innovation to the deployment of the innovation in the marketplace and society. I've just pictured here probably one of the most important ISO standards that have literally changed the world. I don't know if you are probably aware of the fact that the single most important factor, there are many factors, that has impacted the development of global trade is the introduction of the freight container. The standardized freight container has been the single most important factor, and these are studies that have been done on the development of global trade. And the key point here of the freight container is the fact to have an agreement, because the technical solution is a relatively rudimentary, I would say, trivial solution to a certain extent, without penalizing the inventiveness of Malcolm McLean that he introduced that. But the key point is the agreement and the fact that the players as diverse as railway companies, truck companies, port operators, cargo companies, and public authorities that are involved in the regulation of these things get to an agreement on something that allow to streamline, in this case, the means of transportation. There are many examples of that. That's probably one of the most striking. But if you take more recent technologies and look at, for example, the use of digital media, you would look that the MPEG standards are the core of the development of the revolution of digital media and many other things. And in the World Wide Web, where we said that you have certainly standards, although not ISO standards, but other type of standards has been at the core of the development and this explosion of the World Wide Web. Other factors are to allow to share investment and risk, and this is particularly important in certain technology, and in technologies that are fast-moving or that can have disruptive impacts on the companies that are in that context, or to help to remove undue proprietary interest in some cases. And this is, we have a complex relations between, for example, standards and patents in the way that they can help and unleash the potential of, and there is an optimal balance, although it's not easy to find, between the use of standards, open standards, and patents in terms of helping the dissemination of technologies. But that's also, we could spend hours on this one, the role of standards in research and development process, and how the two elements are actually very much interrelated at the various stages. On this, I'm the pleasure to say that last year we have organized in CERN, here hosted by CERN very kindly, and very grateful for the support they gave, a very interesting international conference on the relation between standardization and innovation. We had wonderful speakers, and by the way, we have issued a publication, just a few copies with me, but this is available on the ISO website, so that can be freely downloaded, where you have the transcript of this conference where we had a wonderful set of cases presenting the relation of standardization and innovation in different perspectives. With that, I turn the attention on sustainable development and social responsibility. I guess that most of you are familiar with the notion of the sustainable development that was introduced in '87 by the Brundtland report. But it's interesting to note that to a certain extent that this was well known. For example, that's not new in the history of humankind. I found very interesting that in the great binding law of the Iroquois nations, you find this statement, which is very brilliant and forward-looking. It's look and listen for the welfare of the whole people and have always in view not only the present, but also the coming generation, the unborn of the future nations. How they knew better, in a certain sense. But today, many people think like that. So it's just the scratch marks, and you know that this is unfortunately a very popular thing. Now, to achieve sustainable development goals is a difficult task. There are a lot of challenges to be addressed, and dialogue, engagement, and cooperation among the concerned parties are essential factors. And I would like to tell you what is our vision. Is standards in this context can be and are important tools that support implementation of good practices that can go in supporting sustainability. Basically, our vision is this, that as standards have been and are an essential element of the infrastructure of industrial society, helping to translate innovation into invention and scientific discovery into products, systems, and processes. In a similar way, standards can be and are an essential component of the emerging infrastructure for a sustainable world. What we need to work on, and many people and organizations are working in this direction, is completely rethinking the use of or the creation of materials, the product design and the life cycles. In the way products are designed, the old approach is completely wrong in the context of the quest for sustainable development. You need to think in the product design immediately with the full product life cycle, with the idea of modularization and reuse of components and so on, and many other things that need to enter into the core part of engineering, processing, and relations and good practices to be adopted if you really want to translate in another direction. That's a lot of things to say, a lot of things that are happening here. The only problem is that if we have enough time compared with what is there, and also I think I'm exhausting my time for this presentation. The only other thing I would like to say that standards and sustainability can be covered in two ways, directly, when you have a subject covered by the standards that directly addresses specifically sustainability issues, or indirectly, when you have, for example, standards that relate to testing products, procedures, etc., that have an impact in sustainable development areas. And there are many standards developed by ISO that cover sustainability issues, and many by other organizations. One important thing that I'd like to note is that there is a guide on addressing sustainability in standards that has been published in 2014. So it is a guide that is presented to all technical committees and groups and experts, how to consider sustainability issues when designing and developing standards. That's very important. And there are many other documents, but probably some of you may be familiar with the ISO 26000, which is a very important document developed by ISO with a large involvement, very large involvement of stakeholder groups that basically provides a tool for sustainability management by any type of organization. So it's a guidance on how to address sustainability from the point of view of the organization. And these are some of the things that we do in this area. And as I said, I guess my time is over, so happy to have discussions afterwards if possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniele.